Hey, what up guys, it's Dan. In today's video, we're going to be looking at two putters that I customized for my buddy Nathaniel over at Kicks Covers. And this is just going to be an overview of kind of a step-by-step process of how we do it. So let's get started. Alright, so the first step of any putter customization is going to start with actually taking the shaft off of the putter head. This is a pretty simple process. All you're going to have to do is just add a little bit of heat down around the hosel area until the epoxy breaks loose, and then the head should come right off. If you have any club building experience at all, you're going to find that this is definitely the easiest part of the process. It can be done with a torch or a heat gun. If you've never done it before, I'd recommend the heat gun just because it reduces your chance of doing any damage with a torch. With the heads actually taken off, we're going to now pull the weights out of the weight ports. You don't actually have to pull the weights on the Futura to take the head, to actually break the head down. But I do have to remove the weights on the Phantom X because there are 4 screws underneath the weights inside the weight ports that have to be removed in order to have the head broken down. Now, what you're seeing me do now is add a little bit of heat because they did put some Loctite on the screws that are holding the pieces together. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. I've taken apart putters that do have Loctite. I would say it's about 50-50. Sometimes they don't put Loctite on it and they come apart a lot easier. This particular putter, whoever put it together, definitely wanted to make sure it wasn't going to come apart easily because it was more of a challenge than what I normally run into when actually breaking down the putter. But once I was able to get all of the screws removed from the putter, I guess it would technically be the right side wing came out pretty easily, but the left side wing, which has the through pass for the hosel, was really giving me a bit of a challenge. So I had to add quite a bit more heat to try to get the double-sided tape that's inside. There's like double-sided tape wrapped around the entire internal part of that piece to try to give it additional strength of holding together. And I'm trying to get that to break down without doing any damage to the aluminum. And I'm using a rubber mallet to gently kind of tap it loose to see if I can get it to break. And it just did not want to break loose for me. Normally, you won't run into quite this many issues. This is probably one of the more difficult putters to take apart that I've had in a little while. But after a little bit of working at it, I was finally able to get that piece to break loose. The one note I will say is be very careful with how long you're leaving your torch on. It doesn't take much to damage the aluminum. But with that piece finally broken free and out of the putter, we're ready to move on to the next step. So the next step in the process is going to be grinding off any damage, surface scratches, dents, dings, anything that's that we want taken off the putter. If you're looking to do this yourself, I'm not really doing this video as so much a tutorial as more of just an overview of my process for doing a customization. But I have done a pretty in-depth video, which I will link in the description or maybe put in the corner of this video here, where I go into detail about how I do my grinding and how to do it in a way that will avoid damage or permanently ruining your putter. So I'm not going to go through all of that information right here. This is kind of just a quick overview. But these putters were both in pretty good shape. There was only a couple big dings on the top of this Futura putter, but other than that, the putters were pretty easy to get cleaned up. There wasn't too much material removal that I had to do. So this is kind of just a showing you the step as in the process, and we'll move on to step number 3. For our third step, we're going to jump over to my 30-watt Omtech fiber laser, where we're going to be putting on the custom engraving on the actual putter. So we're doing two different types of engraving. On the Phantom X putter, he wanted to do a Jordan like fan themed engraving. So on the wings, I'm doing this elephant print with a little like Jumpman logo on the inside. And then on the Futura putter, we're doing kind of a custom scroll work that I actually created myself. I actually did the scroll work design myself and then incorporated that into the actual laser software. So I know that a lot of guys are not going to have lasers, so you're not going to be able to do this type of work. But if you are in the market, I would highly recommend Omtech. I got the 30-watt laser. Honestly, I wish I would have gone with the 60-watt, but if you have the money, I think they're around $3,500 to $4,000 for a 60-watt. I highly recommend it. Step 4 is a pretty simple step. We're just cleaning up the lasering work that we just did. The laser leaves like kind of rough edges. When it removes material, some of the edges around the actual engraving can be a little bit rough. So I'm just doing very, very light buffing / polishing passes to just take off any of the roughness and give it a nice, clean, finished look before we move on to the next step. All right, so with all of the deburring done and the polishing done, we go on to step 5. And I know that step 5 technically says that we're doing the heat treatment and oil can finish, which is true. That is what you see on your screen right now, but I kind of missed a step. Technically step 5 should be sandblasting. On this particular putter that I'm working on, the Futura, I did like a light bead blasting to give it a slightly satin polished look. Before I did the torch finish. And then on the other parts, I had to do a 100 grit aluminum oxide blasting finish to prep it for the step that comes after this, which is the Cerakote step. But I left out the sandblasting one. I apologize. That step does need to be put in there, and in future videos I'll make sure it gets in. Sandblasting is a pretty simple process. If you're not familiar with it, you can probably just Google sandblasting and it'll bring up thousands of videos you can watch about it. But let's get back to what I'm doing right now. So in this step, I'm actually doing a torch finish. So what you saw me do at the very beginning was I started applying heat to the head with a torch gun. This is a very important step. Don't skip the torch gun. You do want to use the heat gun because it's going to remove a lot of the moisture from the putter before you actually apply the literal torch to it. So use a heat gun first. I apologize for calling it a torch gun. That might get confusing. Use a heat gun first to kind of, for about a minute or so, just to heat the head up to a couple hundred degrees, and then pull out your torch and start applying the actual flame to it to get the head to the 450, 500 degrees that you need for it to start to oxidize. So what you're seeing right now is the head's going from a silver finish to a golden finish, and that is happening through the process of oxidation. As I heat up the head, a thin layer of oxidation is forming on the head, which gives it this golden hue. With the head, once the head reaches the look and temperature that I need, then I can go directly into dipping it into the oil, quenching it in the oil, which is what you see happening right now. You're going to want to be careful with this process. Make sure the head is fully quenched and cooled before you try touching it or anything. In this video, I would normally just leave the head in the oil the entire time until it was cool to the touch. But for the purpose of the video, I wanted you guys to be able to actually see what the finish looked like and kind of that golden hue that I'd gotten out of it just by applying the heat. This particular finish, this oxidation layer, doesn't provide any additional protection for the metal. It doesn't provide any rust protection, which isn't a big problem with this head because it is stainless steel. But it also doesn't provide any protection against any other type of damage, and will wear off with time. The top part, any part that brushes the ground or anything, will slowly wear with time. The top part should keep its color for a very, very long time if well cared for. For our sixth step, we are applying Cerakote. And for Cerakote, honestly, it's a multi-step process in and of itself. There's a lot of tutorials on YouTube on about how to do Cerakote, which I highly recommend watching. I may do my own tutorial at some point. But because, again, this is just a step-by-step, I'm just showing you what I'm doing, not so much how you actually do it. I would highly recommend doing a lot of research on it before you start buying Cerakote stuff. But the process is pretty much prep the part, spray the part, and put the part in the oven for baking. And that's what we've done. The seventh and final step in the process is paint fill. Now, I know I'm going to get some pushback on the way I do my paint fill because a lot of guys don't like it. You guys see people doing their paint fill with the syringes and stuff, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Matter of fact, in many paint fill applications, the syringe application is the best option. If you're doing the dots on the back or any large areas where you're applying large amounts of paint, the syringe is a great option because it can reduce air bubbles and give you a more professional look and finish. But for what I'm doing here, the syringe is actually not the most effective way. I'm using an extremely fine tip paint brush to put the paint exactly where I want in the scroll work. It just makes the cleanup process easier. There's less mess, there's less flow over, and less wasted paint. So that's why you see me using a paintbrush instead of the syringe. Either one works. I'm not saying one's better than the other. I'm just saying that for different applications, different options may work better than other options. So I'm using a little bit of acetone on a rag to wipe away the excess paint, and then putting the putters back together. And well, I guess the only thing left is the finished product. And here it is. I hope you guys enjoyed the video and liked how the putters turned out. I was really happy with how everything came out in the end. And if you did, I hope you'll consider liking and subscribing to the channel. And as always, we'll be back with more videos in the future. If there's anything that you would like to see from me, please drop it in the comments below. Any questions, concerns, or maybe suggestions for future videos. All right, guys, that's it for me. I hope you guys have a great week. Go out there, make a lot of putts, and we'll see you next time.